Critical to Canada's energy and economic security, the Prime Minister didn't even raise the topic with President Biden yesterday. How are we supposed to rebuild a relationship with our most important ally when this PM can't even raise the most pressing issue, while 50,000 jobs on both sides of the border are at risk? How can Canadians believe the Prime Minister when he has no talk, no action?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to be able to correct the honourable member and point out that, yes, indeed, in our extensive bilateral conversations with the Americans yesterday, we brought up Line 5 because it continues to be an important issue for people in Ontario and Quebec and indeed across the country. We spoke yesterday about how Canada is a reliable source of energy, contributing to U.S. energy security and economic competitiveness. Ambassador Hillman and our Detroit Consul General are strongly advocating for Line 5's continued operation, and our government continues to engage at the highest level.
Why does the Prime Minister excel so much at being the worst?
Opposition.
Build back better together. That's a nice slogan, Mr. Speaker, but on day one, the Biden administration let thousands of Canadian families down with the cancellation of Keystone XL. Yesterday, 30,000 families were expecting the Prime Minister to bring up the situation personally with Line 5 because a decision has to be made in May. Michigan declared an energy emergency, and it doesn't seem to be urgent to this Prime Minister, despite the fact that workers, families, farms, communities across Ontario and Quebec are worried about Line 5. The Prime Minister's language was very specific. We raised it. Did the Prime Minister personally raise Line 5 with President Biden?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday Canada and the United States agreed to an ambitious roadmap partnership. We will work together to beat COVID-19 and ensure everyone everywhere has access to a vaccine. We will also fight climate change and accelerate clean growth. We will create jobs, we will grow the middle class and address systemic racism. We are each other's closest allies and most important trading partners. And yes, we talked about energy security, we talked about cross-border flows, and yes, we raised Line 5.
The
enthusiasm the Conservatives have for this one issue, they can certainly continue to talk about the we charity and spin conspiracy theories. We're going to stay focused on delivering for Canadians.
Today, the Prime Minister has a choice. Will he stand on the side of people who cannot afford the medication they need and desperately need help? Or will he stand on the side of Big Pharma, who doesn't want to see medication coverage for all? The Liberal government's own report states that a Canada Pharmacare Act is one of the key steps in establishing medication coverage for all. That's exactly what our new Democratic bill does. So my question to the Prime Minister, will he be voting in favor of our bill to bring in medication coverage for all Canadians, yes or no?
Why does the Prime Minister excel so much at being the worst?
Should have to choose between paying for their medication or putting food on the table. That's why this government has done more over the past 5 years than any previous government to lower the prices of prescription drugs. And we know there is more to do, Mr. Speaker. But unlike the NDP, we will not be imposing in provincial jurisdiction rules that are not worked out with them. We respect the Constitution on this side of the House, and we'll work hand in glove with the premiers to ensure that we're ensuring pharmacare universally across this country.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Le Premier ministre a des faits partout.
Now, the Prime Minister has failed in many ways, Mr. Speaker. The highest unemployment rate and the highest deficit in the G7. Another thing, the lowest vaccination rates in the G7. Another failure. When the Montreal Habs were faced with a string of losses, they fired their coach. Given that that's the case, wouldn't it be better if the Liberals also fired their coach? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we made a direct promise to Canadians at the beginning of the pandemic. We promised that we would be there for them as long as the pandemic lasted, and that is what we're doing. We are there to support workers, families, small businesses. We will be there to support our seniors. We will continue to protect the health of Canadians so that we can get through this pandemic and reestablish economic growth as quickly as possible. That is our plan. That is our approach. But the Conservatives seem to think we're spending too much. That's just not true, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Trudeau killed jobs in the West, and now we learned intentionally in Quebec. This Prime Minister, by contrast, spreads job losses around equally. In fact, 850,000 of them. The highest unemployment in the G7. The worst economic growth per capita since the Great Depression. Doesn't this Prime Minister understand that spreading misery around equally is not a virtue?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the conservative politicians from the very beginning of this pandemic kept insisting that we were spending too much in investing on Canadians, that we should have helped businesses before we helped families. The member opposite specifically said that he didn't believe in the kind of investments we were making in Canadians. Well, he was wrong then and he's wrong now. Indeed, as of January, Canada has recovered 71% of the jobs lost in the wake of the pandemic, compared with only 56% in the U.S. At 64.3%, Canada has a higher labor force participation rate than Germany, the U.S., and Japan. We are working right.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Well, the problem with that is on 49 different occasions in the House, the Prime Minister said the best measurement of jobs is the unemployment rate. And by that measure, Japan has a 3% unemployment rate. Germany and the UK, 5% unemployment rate. US, 6%. Italy and France, two socialist countries, have 9% unemployment rate. But Canada is at the top of the heap for job losses and for unemployment. Why does the Prime Minister excel so much at being the worst? Is it because he has so much practice?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, while the opposition plays political word games, we're going to remain focused on Canadians. We have been, from the very beginning, there to invest in Canadians, to support small businesses through this historic pandemic, working with families, working with workers to support them as we make it through this. We're going to continue to stay focused on what is necessary to support families across this country and bring our economy roaring back as we reopen. That's the plan and the focus this government has taken. Conservatives can well say we're doing too much. We know we're going to continue to do what is necessary.
Liberals have put Canada months behind the rest of the world in getting vaccines, and troublingly, yesterday the government said that even with mass vaccination, COVID restrictions may continue. More public sacrifice and lockdowns were the response to the second wave, and the government's projections say that that clearly didn't work. So if the government is now saying vaccines won't lift all restrictions, what's the Prime Minister's plan B, or does he plan on keeping Canada under COVID restrictions forever?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not entirely sure what the opposition health critic has been watching, but we have seen over the past many weeks the numbers decline because of the significant public health measures that Canadians have been engaged in, the sacrifices people have been taking while the provinces have led the way on bringing in the right kinds of restrictions over the past number of months. We've seen it working, Mr. Speaker, and as vaccines are arriving at the same time as we're seeing a danger of variants, we need to keep remaining vigilant, get as many people vaccinated as possible, and continue to keep ourselves safe from the threat of a third wave.
The member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
Well, I watched Theresa Tam's press conference on Friday, and it had a violently high hockey stick projection of what the third wave could look like because the Prime Minister has not produced vaccines for Canadians. Virtually no one can get one. But again, the health officials said that even with mass vaccination, the government might not recommend opening up the country. People are losing their lives, their mental health, their jobs, and we need certainty and a plan to move forward. Is the government now saying that a fully vaccinated population won't end lockdowns? And if so, what will?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, every step of the way during this pandemic, we've made our decisions based on the best recommendations of science and scientists, comparing data from around the world, moving forward in ways that have kept Canadians safer than many countries, while at the same time we have seen too many tragedies. We will continue to move forward in ways that minimize the spread of COVID-19, that maximize the speed with which vaccines arrive, and work hand in hand with the provinces provinces and territories with the public health measures that are necessary to see us through this vaccine, this pandemic, and out the other side in the best shape possible.
The Prime Minister thought, who should I buy them from? He looked around the world and he said, I know, the country that's holding our people hostage. You can imagine the PRC Politburo filled with bureaucrats rolling around on the ground in gut-splitting laughter at this Prime Minister's naivete. Madam Speaker, simple question. When he wasted 100 days in the PRC, what the hell was he thinking?
Anyone? I mean, it's just $250 million. I mean, what's that between friends, right? Anyone? Any data? No?
Thank you, Ms. Hempel-Garner.
Thank you,
well, Mr. Speaker, during this pandemic, universal pharmacare is needed more urgently than ever. 90% of Canadians support it. Millions of Canadians can't pay for the medication their doctors prescribe, and hundreds die every year. The Hoskins report stated it was essential that the principles of universal health care apply to universal pharmacare. The vote on the Canada Pharmacare Act is in an hour, and Canadians want to know, will the Prime Minister betray today his election promise for public universal pharmacare?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we agree that no Canadian should have to choose between putting food on the table or paying for their medications. That's why we remain committed to national universal pharmacare. Though we welcome debate on this motion, on this private member's bill, any actions must be taken with provinces and territories and not unilaterally imposed upon the provinces and territories. Now is the time to work with provinces and territories, as we are, to provide all Canadians access to affordable medication.
Honourable member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the facts are clear. The reality is that millions of Canadians today have to choose between paying their rent and getting the medication their doctors prescribe. Many are getting sicker and even dying from this lack of basic health care. Canada is the only country in the world with universal health care that doesn't cover prescription drugs. And the truth is, drug prices have risen every single year under this government's mandate. The truth as well is that the NDP bill works exactly the way our public health care system does, allowing provinces and territories to participate if they wish. Will the Prime Minister stop with his hollow excuses and vote for pharmacare as he has promised and finally deliver universal pharmacare to every Canadian who needs it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have been working since day one as a government to reduce prescription drug prices in this country, and we have done more to reduce prescription drug prices than any other government in history. And yes, we know that there is more to do, and that's why we have rolled up our sleeves and are working on national universal pharmacare in partnership with the provinces and territories. The NDP are pulling a political stunt to try and demonstrate that they could do it in the wave of a magic wand. Well, Mr. Speaker, we work in the real world here. We work with the provinces, we work within the Constitution, and we will deliver national pharmacare for Canadians. Hear, hear.